We lost our cousin Peter Livingston, his wife Donna, and their two daughters Everly and Lydia. They lived in Ashburn, Virginia.
They were coming back from a figure skating camp.
Amy Hunter and Laura Ogendre have become champions for aviation safety since losing close family in the midair collision over the Potomac last January. In the years since, they've learned it was not any single thing that led to the tragedy, but a number of known risks that all came together that night in the worst possible way.
What we kept hearing over and over again was that this was an accident waiting to happen. It was a preventable accident.
Preventable because, as the NTSB investigation has revealed, there were a host of unresolved safety issues which in some cases had been going on for years.
Over the past 3 years from before the accident, they had over 15,000 close proximity events.
Other issues which contributed to the problem that night? The Army Black Hawk helicopter was not broadcasting its position to other aircraft. Also, the pilots were asked to maintain visual separation, which basically means they were told to literally just be on the lookout for other traffic in the airspace. And instead of just handling helicopters, one person in the short-staffed air traffic control tower was also tasked with managing airplanes during that shift. And it didn't even end there.
Multiple holes were in this system.
I was in the military for 29 years.
Steve Scheibner, who goes by Captain Steve on his popular YouTube aviation page, was also a pilot for American for decades, often flying in and out of Reagan National. One of his biggest concerns about flying in and out of DCA has to do with changes that were made after 9/11 to keep planes from flying directly over large parts of the district.
They took what essentially was an 8-lane highway in and out of DCA and they turned it into a 2-lane country road. It goes up and down the Potomac River. And you can't stray from that little narrow path in and out. It's all prohibited airspace. If you do, bad things happen.
As a former Navy pilot, he also does not think training flights like the one the Army Black Hawk helicopter made that night should happen.
There is no effective training that takes place in commercial airspace over a crowded airport. Go do your training outside that airspace, knock yourself out, but in that airspace, take off the night vision goggles, listen up on the same frequencies, and transit through as quickly as you can.
So that is a look at some of the issues that led up to the midair collision in the sky there above the Potomac River last January 29th. But what has been done since then to make this area safer? Well, in our next story, we're going to take a look at that, and we're going to take a look at what safety advocates say still needs to be done to make sure such a tragedy never happens again. Reporting at Reagan National Airport, Tom Rousey, 7 News. In our previous story, we took a look at the many safety lapses that led up to the tragic midair collision in the sky above the Potomac last year. Now we're going to take a look at what has changed since then to try to make the skies safer and what still needs to change.
How did the FAA not know?
On January 29th, when an Army helicopter collided with an incoming commuter jet just short of Reagan National Airport, newly appointed Secretary of Transportation Sean Duffy had been on the job for 1 day. He immediately banned most helicopter traffic along what's called Helicopter Route 4, a path over the Potomac River that passed as close as 75 feet to incoming airplanes, leaving zero margin for error.
They pose an intolerable risk.
Another concern, outdated equipment like this.
It's too old.
A 21st century air traffic control system was long overdue, but it is now already being put in place thanks to an initial $12 billion investment approved by Congress.
It's going to take 3 or 4 years or more because, like finishing your house, it's the fine work at the end that takes all the time.
Steve Scheibner, a former Navy and American Airlines pilot who hosts the popular Captain Steve YouTube page, says that's a great start, but a lot more needs to be done to make aviation safer here in D.C. and nationwide.
Let's have less time talking on a radio, which is very 1930s and 40s-ish of us, and let's get more into texting. There's a technology to text with airplanes where I can see my instruction very clearly on the screen. I hit a button that says accept. It loads it into the computer for me, and the airplane flies it. I don't have to talk to anybody, and I don't have to worry about somebody else talking at the same time I'm talking and blocking my transmission.
There are many safety gaps that are still in place, and we need to close them as soon as possible.
Amy Hunter and Laura Ogendre lost close family in the collision. They've since become aviation safety advocates, promoting the Rotor Act, which eliminates a loophole allowing military helicopters to fly near Reagan National and elsewhere without broadcasting their position. That's important for some military missions, but too risky in American civilian airspace.
We know that that particular technology is incredibly important and should have been put in place much earlier.
The U.S. Senate passed the Rotor Act. Now Amy and Laura are urging members of the House to do the same, so other families don't have to suffer as they have.
We don't want this to become just an anniversary story. We don't want this to just be a really sad story that happened to a group of people and then we forget about it as time goes on. Millions of people are traveling every single day. They essentially put their lives into the hands of our system.
Tom Rousey, 7 News.
In the aftermath of the midair collision, it was all hands on deck. Hundreds of law enforcement, fire rescue, and paramedics from across the region worked nonstop. I spoke with emergency response leaders about the challenges they faced in the hours, days, even weeks following the collision, and the lessons they took away from that tragedy.
I know when I talk about it, my voice cracks, and my therapist says that's okay.
In the years since the midair collision over the Potomac, the feelings are still raw for D.C. Fire and EMS Chief John Donnelly.
It's important to acknowledge that maybe in the moment we are responders and we put that away, but later it comes out.
These first responders prepare for worst-case scenarios. They train for mass casualty events. And Metropolitan Police Interim Chief Jeffrey Carroll says that makes a difference in an emergency.
I would say a lot of the issues that you would expect, like the radios and things like that, we'd actually worked out before.
But when those men and women face an unprecedented disaster like the one on the Potomac that night, training only goes so far.
You have to remember at that point, there hadn't been a major commercial air crash in the United States in 18 years. There's not a lot of experience with this. I responded to 9/11, but I didn't deal with the mass casualty in the same way we dealt with it here.
Rescue boats and first responders converged on the scene from across the DMV.
Saving lives, like number one thing, like let's get there, can we save people? What does it look like for me?
I thought we were going to save lives. One of the challenges initially was how many divers are we going to need? How big is the wreckage area? What are we going to do?
Divers could only stay in the water for short periods because in the middle of winter, hypothermia is a real risk.
The water was cold, it was icy, and then just the mechanics of it all, it definitely made it more challenging.
It wasn't long before the chiefs knew there'd be no survivors.
We wrote down that our first priority was to take care of the families because they became our survivors. The second priority was to support the NTSB in their investigation because that's a complex process. And then the third one was to make sure our responders had the help we needed.
So they worked to recover the 67 victims. They worked to preserve each piece of wreckage and locate the black boxes. And while they'll work the lessons learned a year ago into future trainings, Chief Donnelly hopes never to encounter another tragedy like this.
We don't want to replan this incident. This should never happen again.
In Southwest D.C., Rebecca Turco, 7 News. Within the first hour or so, first responders realized what they hoped would be a rescue operation would become a recovery effort, and a massive one. So their focus became getting every victim home.
This is something that we would never expect to happen.
I believe there's always parts of the job that make us think about today.
It started as a rescue mission. First responders came from across the region to look for survivors of the midair crash near Reagan National Airport in the icy waters of the Potomac. But as the minutes turned to hours, hope began to dim.
I hope they understand that we did everything humanly possible that we could to rescue their loved ones.
We have our BCD, which is our scuba tank.
Dive teams never gave up. Astasia Myler was just 3 weeks on the job.
I trusted my training and my experience, and I just went out there and did what I could do.
In the frigid river, divers could only stay in the water 15 or 20 minutes at a time to avoid hypothermia.
We had a bunch of divers that night, so we were just kind of swapping out. Some people were getting warm in boats and just going again. The plane parts are very sharp too, so we dealt with suits getting ripped. So we had people where their suits were filled up with water.
And while they searched in the cold and dark, hours passed. And as Captain Michael Puglisi explains, nature complicated the job.
And we had to search through an ever-expanding debris field because of the tides to make sure that we were accounting for all of the victims.
We want more divers, so a total of 13 at the pier.
As divers brought the victims to shore, forensics teams worked to identify them.
The forensic biology unit shifted their priorities and their work just for this endeavor.
Dr. Francisco Diaz is DC's chief medical examiner. He kept in contact with the victims' families every day.
I got to know a lot of them on a first name basis. And I have to say that's the most gracious group of people I have encountered in light of this tragedy.
Within a week, all the victims were found and identified so they could return to their families.
I hope they sleep better at night knowing that we honored their loved ones and we did everything in our powers that we could to bring them home for them.
I'm Rebecca Turco, 7 News.